Well, hello and welcome. Today is Wednesday, September 23rd, and this is Wednesday lesson number 28 of Preaching to an Empty Room. 28 Wednesdays. We started this in the spring, and now as of this week, it is fall. And I know that this has just been really weird and challenging for all of us, but I also want to say that it has been very encouraging to me to know that, of course, in fact, I am not preaching to an empty room, but I am sharing these lessons with you. And all of those who have listened to these lessons over these past many weeks, whether it's every single week you're listening or on and off again you've listened, or whenever you've been able to, you've listened, you have encouraged me and given me a reason to press forward. And I hope that perhaps at some points these lessons might have helped to do the same for you also. Now, of course, I say all of those things because starting next week, these lessons are going to be coming to you a little bit differently, we hope and we pray, because beginning next week, we're planning to offer an in-person Wednesday night gathering for the first time since March 11th at 6:30 on Wednesday nights at College Hill. And what that means for you is that if you're ready and able, you could come and participate with us in person at the building at 6:30 for more than just a lesson like you've been getting on Wednesdays, but for a devotional with songs and prayers and scriptures. That opportunity, we pray, will be available to you next week. But also, you'll have one other new opportunity at your disposal, and that is a Wednesday night live stream at 6:30, which we've been doing on Sunday mornings, but we have not been doing on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, you've been having these recorded lessons, but starting next Wednesday, as we open an in-person gathering, we're also going to be providing a live stream of that service on Wednesday nights at 6:30, which you could also participate in. Or if you are not able to do either one of those things, you will still have the recordings of the Wednesday night service we'll be putting on, as well as the lesson within it, so that you can continue to follow along and learn from those things. So that's what we hope and pray will be on the horizon for us beginning, we plan on next week. Which means, of course, that this could be the last lesson of me preaching to you in this empty room for hopefully a little while. And I was wondering what to do with that. And I got to thinking about how, have you ever read something that you just love so much that when you got down to the final page of it, all you wanted to do was flip back to the start again at the end and flip back to the start and start reading it all over again? Have you ever read something you loved like that? Do you want to just start all over again? I was watching a show the other day where this happened. In the show, you see throughout the show this young girl who's writing poetry. Part of the show is about this high school aged girl who aspires to be a poet. And near the end of the show, she gives her notebook of the poem she's been writing to her mother to read. And the poem she's written is about her mother. And so you, as the viewer, watch this mother's emotions as she reads the poem that she holds in her hands. And she turns the page. And when she gets to the end, she flips right back to the start again, and she starts reading it over again because she just loves it so much. It's almost like a teenager who's reading the very first love letter they received in bed at night by the lamp long past bedtime, or like a child who's being tucked in by their parents and always ask for that same story to be read to them to help them to get to sleep. But at the end of it, they're not asleep. They just want to hear it one more time. Just tell that story again. Or maybe you remember ever loving a song so much that you just wanted to have it on repeat like all day long. You just wanted to listen to it and wrap yourself up in that melody. Or maybe it's a worship song and you didn't want to just sing it during the assembly, but you wanted to sing it while you did the dishes and sing it while you went to work because you just wanted to hear it again and again. Or maybe you can remember somebody saying something to you, and when they said it, you just wanted to say that again, please. Like, I love you, or you're hired, or I forgive you. Or I was thinking about how it must be for parents when your little baby first says mama or dada, after the shrieks of joy at what they've just said, or maybe the I told you they would say my name first gloating that goes with that. What do you want to do next? But get out your phone and try to capture it, right? And you're saying, what did you say, sweetie? Will you say it again for me one more time? Just say it again. Say it again. Some of the best things in life just need to be said again and again and again. And when we hear them, we just can't wait to say that again. Say it again. And I think that Psalm 136 is just like that. It is like the book that you never want to put down. It is like the song that you don't mind humming all day long. It is like those sweetest, reassuring words that you just want to hear again and again and again. So what this psalm is going to do is it's going to say again and again and again that thing we so need to hear. For his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. For his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his steadfast love endures forever, who alone does great wonders, for his steadfast love endures forever, who by understanding made the heavens, for his steadfast love endures forever, who spread out the earth on the waters, for his steadfast love endures forever, who made the great lights, for his steadfast love endures forever, the sun to rule over the day, for his steadfast love endures forever, the moon and the stars to rule over the night, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who struck Egypt through their firstborn, for his steadfast love endures forever, and brought Israel out from among them, for his steadfast love endures forever, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, for his steadfast love endures forever, who divided the Red Sea in two, for his steadfast love endures forever, and made Israel pass through the midst of it, for his steadfast love endures forever, but overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea, for his steadfast love endures forever, who led his people through the wilderness, for his steadfast love endures forever. And on the psalm goes like this for at least 10 more verses. Sometimes the best things in life just need to be said again and again and again. And the steadfast love of God is one of those things. It is the top of the list of those things. And so it's the kind of thing that we say and ought to say again and again. And it's really important that we do. Because at some point when push comes to shove, we're going to really need to know those words. Really, really know them deep down in our hearts. And at some point, we will need to do what this psalm is going to go on to do in the end, which is attach those words to more than just the stories of old which came before us, but actually to attach those words as we tell our own story. That's what this psalm goes on to do so very beautifully. So when it starts, as we've read together, one of the things that you'll notice if you really study it carefully is that when this psalm begins, it starts by telling old stories. Stories that happened years and years and years and years and years before the writer of this psalm and before the first readers of this psalm were even alive. So for 5 verses, it goes all the way back and recounts the story of creation, right? And for 6 verses, it tells the story of God rescuing his people from Egypt and the Exodus. And then for 4 verses, it tells about victories in the book of Numbers and how God has given the land to his people, which we see fulfilled in Joshua and Judges. And it tells about Israel's heritage from the Lord, which we see fulfilled in Samuel and in Kings. And all of these stories are drawn, you could say, from the history books of God's people. They're stories of old. They're powerful stories. And this psalm is rehearsing these stories yet again and saying his steadfast love endures forever. But then, in verse 23, the story changes. And it is not their story then that we're looking at anymore. Now it is the psalm writer's story now. That's what's being told. In the verses before, it was how God brought Israel out and how God rescued his people and led them through the wilderness. But now in verse 23, it is he who remembered us in our low estate and rescued us from our foes. So you see how the writer has moved out of the story of the past. And now he's moved into the story of the present time. He was first in the story of the people who came before him. But now the psalm is in the story of the people right there with him. Right there living in this moment. But even still, the refrain doesn't change. The line at the end of the verse, the one that fits so well with the stories of the past, well, it still fits just as well with the stories of their own time. As the past turns to the present, there's no question that the old challenges give way to new ones. But God's people have learned to say, his steadfast love endures forever. And they've learned to say it again and again, and even now, in their own time, to say it still again. And I think that there's something to be learned from this for us. And maybe you're seeing it too. To me, this psalm not only tells us something true about God, which of course it does, but also it teaches us an outlook. This psalm teaches us a way of life. It teaches us that what was true in the past is still true in the present and will be true forever. That God's love endures steadfastly. And it's teaching us, this psalm is not just to look backwards for evidence of that fact, but actually to look all around us here today for evidence of that fact, like teaching us to tell the whole story, even the parts of it that we're living in, this whole story, in light of that fact, and to make the most important part as loud and clear as we can. That even in the ups and downs, and I mean we, like you and me today, we believe that God's love endures forever. We know one thing: to endure completely. And so we say it again and again and again. We give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. We give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. And when a pandemic came and shut our doors, his steadfast love endures forever. And when spring flowers were opening but our doors were closing, his steadfast love endures forever. In April, we set out 10 communion cups, but his steadfast love endures forever. 2,000 Easter eggs were stuffed but never scattered, but his steadfast love endures forever. And the nursing homes and hospitals were put on lockdown, but his steadfast love endures forever. And we lost loved ones and we couldn't even go to their funerals, but his steadfast love endures forever. And people shouted in the streets as they grieved over violence and lives lost, but his steadfast love endures forever. And we've been praying for months and asking the Lord, what now, Lord? But his steadfast love endures forever. We put the Easter Bunny in a Jeep and VBS in a box, for his steadfast love endures forever. In June, we set out 60 communion cups, for his steadfast love endures forever. We started to hear each other's voices and look into each other's eyes again, for his steadfast love endures forever. But we missed our whole family. We missed our old ways. We missed our full strength. But his steadfast love endures forever. And the live stream buzzed and broke way more times than we ever dreamed. And it was frustrating. But his steadfast love endures forever. And we worshiped resolutely, if not in person, in spirit and in truth. For his steadfast love endures forever. In August, we set out 100 communion cups, for his steadfast love endures forever. And we watched some of the children we raised here, 5 of them, be baptized and born again, because his steadfast love endures forever. And we've seen some of our friends get sick, and we've prayed for them together, because his steadfast love endures forever. And as schools are opening, we're praying for security and for overworked teachers, because his steadfast love endures forever. And we believe that in all things God works for good for those who love him, for his steadfast love endures forever. And we know that there are still many obstacles keeping us apart and standing in our way, but his steadfast love endures forever. And we believe that nothing can separate us from the love of Christ, for the steadfast love of the Lord endures forever. And we know that anything we suffer now is not worth comparing with the glory soon to be revealed, for his steadfast love endures forever. So we give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and we will say it again and again and again, that his steadfast love endures forever. My prayer for you today is that you will take joy in hearing those words again and again and again, that you will find them true, not just in the past, but in the days that we are living in the here and in the now. And my prayer is that God may continue to be good to us in all circumstances. My prayer is that God may continue to guide us every step of the way, and that he will teach us to see and say those things that matter most, loudly and clearly, and to say them again and again and again, with every breath we've been blessed to breathe in these lives that we live. God bless you. We'll see you soon.